Only mode.
Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all well. Thanks for joining the staff update. Before I hand you over to Stephen for his update, just to remind you that anytime during the webinar, you can post your questions on the question box and we'll get round to answering these at the end of the update. So Stephen, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry about I've just been changing my computer a little bit, gets a little bit of trouble starting things up. I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to give you an update on where we are with respect to the business generally opening up, the sorts of controls that I know I've talked to you a lot of you about with respect to how we're managing the situation with respect to COVID-19 and so on and so on. So let me just start with the agenda. So the agenda item number one is to talk about what are our timeline plans. So we've discussed this before, and I just think it would really just be good to reiterate. So firstly, I was on a corporate board meeting this morning where we reviewed all of the arrangements that have been put in place with a view to a start on Monday. Talk about last minute, bearing in mind it's Friday and we've already communicated the start on Monday. But the corporate board were happy and signed us off. So there are no more barriers. That's the last step. We have, for the last 2 weeks, been putting in all of the physical controls and everything else in readiness to start up the first groups of apprentices. And as per I communicated with all of you as groups when we talked about the risk assessment, we are operating to that plan of bringing in the first groups of apprentices next week. And then there is a rollout through July, and we have a perceptual anticipation that we'll be finishing off with the JLR groups and the hotel groups, if we're allowed to, government-wise, rules-wise, in August. So that by the end of August, we have all of our workshop training back in place. And obviously, there are still a few unknowns about that, particularly about hotel usage and so on. And we still don't know what all the employers are doing in terms of their own plans, but we're gradually getting a better understanding. So there will be maybe some changes in that, but fundamentally we are operating to that timeline. So the other part of this is the more difficult piece still. I'd like to think we were in a better shape than we are. So we are also trying to get a feel for starting new intakes. I think two things are popping out of this. Is firstly, we thought originally that we wouldn't be taking many in before Christmas, any new intakes before Christmas. We thought it would all be Christmas onwards. I get the impression it's going to be more fragmented from that. It wouldn't surprise me to see that we've got some employers wanting to do September as per usual. I know, for instance, that the guidance at the moment with Jaguar Land Rover is, albeit a smaller cohort, they still want to start in September. And obviously that bodes well in one level, but of course adds complexities in the other, which is the way it is, I guess. And then we've got a continuing dialogue with some companies who are now engaging with us to actually recruit. So there is activity. It's still not clear. I think it's going to take another few weeks, and we're just going to have to sit on our hands for the time being and just wait, and that's testing, because I don't know what the future looks like for us all until I start to get a feel for what the new intake will look like. I've seen so many different scenarios now, but I just have to hold fire on any future guesswork, as it were, until we know the number and the size of the intake. Going back to the steps, so we will be unlocking staff from furlough as we need them. At the moment, we've got everybody unlocked that needs to be unlocked through June. My expectation is that we will start to communicate with the next groups about starting in July. Probably back end of next week, we'll be talking to the next round of staff with a view to giving them notice of unlocking from furlough. And then that will carry on rolling out through July. And obviously we'll talk to you along the way individually. So as staff are unlocked and coming back into the centre, as we've said, there is an induction process that's taking place. We've now tested that 2 or 3 times. So we're starting to get into a good routine and a rhythm with that. It's a similar induction to the learners that they will get when they come in group by group. And then Dan and the team are probably revising the planning every 2 or 3 weeks in terms of timetabling because of the complexities. But there is a timetabling process in place and we are following that. So that just gives you a fundamental feel for hopefully the timelines as they are at the moment. If I talk about the controls, at the end of this, we're going to run a very short video, which just gives you a feel for the typical controls that are actually physically here. But we have been working on the controls for COVID-19 now for some weeks. Without going into too much detail at this point in time, we really are taking a very cautious approach. As I've always said with you, it's about the safety of you and the safety of the learners here. It starts with understanding what's going on in general society. It then looks at how we are making sure that wherever we can, we minimize the number of people on site, limit the number of opportunities for a transmission to come into the center, and wherever possible, making sure that if we've got problems that we identify them quickly so that we have anybody who has any symptoms or is starting to feel unwell is out of the center as quickly as possible. And obviously we've got an overlay on that. We don't know how track and trace will work around that as well. That's very much as I've explained that through the risk assessments. All of the risk assessment elements are now in place in the center. So physically we are as ready as we can be. It's a continually reviewing process. We will continue to work on that with you when you come back into center. So just in terms of the types of controls that are in place, signage is very strong, as you can imagine. Things like one-way systems are all in place. All of the control requirements for each area are up in the relevant areas. We've got face shields, for instance, being delivered to Fiona's house today, which we've just been told are delivered. So they'll be here for the first groups of staff on Monday, and they'll be issued. We have sanitizing facilities all over the centre. We've got the cleaners cleaning. We've just agreed with them to get a top up sanitizing units, for instance. So we are physically just putting everything into place at 100 miles an hour, and as far as we're concerned, we're as ready as we can be. We'll look at those controls on an ongoing basis through the health and safety groups. So this is now being treated as a standard risk assessment. If individual staff have concerns regarding health and safety issue, they can obviously talk to their manager. They can talk to the health and safety coordinators or those represented on the health and safety working group, and they will bring those into discussion, and we will review them and adjust them as is necessary. And we are very open to thoughts and ideas. You know, we don't have all the answers. I've said that a number of times. But I also want to go back and remind everybody, this is not about physical changes. This is about behaviours. And so much of what we've done is going to help, but actually behaviours and people thinking very clearly about how to protect themselves, how to maintain their space so that they're in control of what's going on around them, particularly with people movements coming into their local space. That's about personal behaviours and personal approach, and that is such a strong part of this. And if we all play our part, I am pretty sure that we won't be able to do any better. But we'll talk a lot more about that when people come back into the centre. The other thing I wanted to talk about today and make sure that it's reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. We only want people in the centre who need to be in the centre. So as much as it's going to be difficult to manage at times if you don't have a need to be here, and that's got to be justified to your manager and is reviewed with the management team every night, then you will still require at this point in time, as per guidelines and as per our risk assessment, to be operating from home. And that really takes me on to something that I just want to raise a point of in very You know, sometimes it's easy to forget what you can't remember and you can't see. So I am very strongly aware that the whole focus of myself, to be fair, and most of the management team and most of the operational team has been on physically getting the centres ready to reopen. And it's been very easy to us forget that we've got large contingents of our staff that are still operating from home. I tried to get their bits of the business back up and running. You know, a particular emphasis on the technical development advisors. And, you know, we know that they've also had to go through a risk assessment process, which has been driven by Make UK, thinking about how they can continue to engage with learners, whether if they're still on furlough, but how do they start talking to the employers with a view to doing physical reviews in their workplaces as is necessary, making sure that the assessments are carried out. You know, all that stuff's going on in the background, and it's been easy for us just to put that to one side at the moment. But I just want to make the point, you know, we're very aware that this is a team effort, and the team is bigger than the two buildings. You know, there is a much, much bigger team at play here. And I just want those people out there who are operating in the field alongside those teams that are carrying out IQA activities and assessment activities with management apprentices and so on. I want you to know that we know you're there. We know you're doing a great job. We know that you're actually going through as much pain and anguish as everybody else. You're not forgotten. And you know, if anywhere along the way we've lost that recognition that you are there, I apologize, but you are not forgotten, and you are part of this big picture. And without you, this business can't function. So there is a focus on the centres. There's a focus for the next few days, I'm sure, on getting apprentices in. But you know, actually, there's got to be a focus on all the 1,000-odd learners we've got out there and the people that are looking after them. You know, and this will swing around again, I'm sure. But you know, for everybody that's out there, thank you for keeping up your efforts and your diligence and keeping this together. Because without you, we wouldn't be in the place we are today. And I can only reinforce what's coming back to me. You know, and it's not about me at all. I'm a tiny piece of this jigsaw puzzle. The feedback I get back from the corporate board today was incredibly complimentary to everybody that's working hard to hold this together. The feedback that I get from my peers and my colleagues is always incredibly complimentary. And they look to us at times and say, well, we've got to figure this out. How can we do this? What did you do? And how are your team doing it? And that's an absolute credit. And the feedback that we're getting back from the employers that are talking to us is incredibly positive. You know, I've just been talking to the team at to my opposite number at Jaguar Land Rover. You know, we're all trying to find our way through this, and they are very, very complimentary about the way this is all being held together, and that's being echoed by our other employers. And that only happens because of everybody's input, and it is incredibly recognised. And you know, I know that's what's going to get us through what have been a very bumpy 2 or 3 weeks. You know, we're dealing with some incredibly difficult challenges to keep the business alive, both as locally and as Make UK. And there are all sorts of demands and requests and discussions going on that affect us all personally in different ways. But we're still hanging in there, and we're still fighting, and we are going to come out the other end of this as stronger than ever before, and that's down to each and everyone's individual efforts. So it is recognised and very much appreciated. We don't want to talk too more about the details of the controls in place, because I think it's really a case of us now start focusing on get up and running. Let's get back to what we do the best. Let's get back to training our learners. I'm going to finish. I'm going to ask Andrew to run a very short video, which is the very short video that all visitors will have to be subjected to. But hopefully it will give you a feel of the quality and the depth which we've gone to make this place as safe as we physically can for the benefit of all of our staff. And then what I'm going to do is open up to questions, and I'll try and field your questions for you. So with that, can I pass back to Andrew to see if we can get this video to run? There we go. Okay, I think I've got control again, have I? I think it's quite clunky here. I think once this presentation is then filed off for, and you can review it again, you may be able to get a better view. We'll just do some testing on that, and if it looks like it's been a different environment, but it really helps people understand just an overview of the print about dealing with this particular issue of how to manage with COVID-19 flying around. And on the slides, what you'll also have seen is various signage that's around, and that's again part of this cascade of information that we're giving people. So as you come back into the business, you'll get exposed to more and more of that. If in the meanwhile you've got specific concerns about the way we're going to operate, I mean, you can ask the questions now, of course, or just ask the question and remotely, it's fine. You're right. Remember, this is about openness. We've got now to hide here, and we want everyone to feel comfortable. So at that, I'm not going to say anything for the moment other than try and answer some of your questions if you've got any current questions that I haven't been able to answer.
Yeah, just a few questions. So first one, is the wearing of face masks going to be compulsory in the training centre?
Yeah. So the current risk assessment does not specify the wearing of face masks or face coverings. So we've identified the most significant point where social distancing and difficulties in managing your own space come is particularly where tutors, particularly workshop tutors, may need or choose to engage with a learner. So in those particular instances, we will be issuing face shields. And I just mentioned earlier on, the first 20 will be here on Monday for the first group of staff. They will be reusable, so they can be wiped clean and you have control over the hygiene of those individually. They'll be kept at the centre, that's the thinking, rather than taken home, so you're going to carry them around. And they'll belong to you, and we'll obviously issue them as they need to be reissued, but the idea is that you keep your own one. The reason we didn't go down the road of face coverings is, as I think I've explained a number of times, there's still standby at the moment, and that is, one, the evidence. If the social distancing is generally pretty strong, the evidence is their value is pretty low, if negligible, if not valuable at all. Secondly, in order to be pretty effective and to have any form of effect, they really need to be properly fitted. And even if we went down the road of face coverings, we're probably not going to be able to get medical grade, which again reduces their effectiveness. And we don't think it's right to be taking medical grade face coverings or face masks away from the services that need them better. We are working on, as much as possible, maintaining the social distancing, hence the reason why groups are in 6s, not 12s, so that we can double half the area that people were or double the area people operating in, to make the 2-metre distancing much easier to manage, and therefore not having to rely on PPE. So that's the approach we've taken. Now, if the government guidelines changes, we'll have to review it, of course, but the current government guideline is, face coverings are of value if you're going into those environments you can't control numbers of people and movements. And we are a very controlled environment compared to public service, public transport, buses, shops maybe. And it depends on what the shops do as well, of course. So at this moment in time, the answer is it's not built into the risk assessment. If somebody decides in their own wisdom they want to wear a face covering, we will not stop it. So we are not going to be restrictive and say you can't, because it's a personal choice thing. So we will allow individuals, if they choose to or want to wear face coverings, then they can, of course. There are a couple of provisos. Firstly, we've got to do some refinements on Monday around how we do it, but then we will maintain the quarantine rooms, and it will be the duty managers that pick up anybody who is unwell. If they're going to quarantine and therefore suspected they may have the COVID, then the people taken to quarantine will wear face masks, and we'll wear whatever we can get, just standard ones, just to reduce the risk to the person taking them there. The idea is to get them to a place of safety quickly, and we will make sure there are face coverings or face masks in the first aid rooms. So they are the only two exceptions at the moment, apart from where you need them from a point of view dust extraction and so on. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to the next question. What's your opinion on the 10% pay decrease? Why, if we're working full-time, should we have to suffer a decrease?
So I don't have an opinion on the 10% pay decrease. I'm affected by it like you are already affected by it. So my personal opinion on it is not relevant. I think what we have to recognize is that as a business, we're in as much deep trouble as everybody else. And that trouble is getting deeper, just like all the businesses in the country. And the team at the top of this business, and I'm sort of somewhere up there, are looking at every opportunity in every way to try and hold the business together. And that means keeping as many people engaged in the business as possible. You know, every family, every circumstance, every person will have a different view about how they think that should or shouldn't be done. I think it's up to you as members of staff to give your views to the National Staff Council, or Forum, I should say. Venetia's our local contact. So that at least the team that are in discussion with the NSF are very clear on your feelings. You know, and I would sit here and say quite bluntly, if the generic feeling across the whole business, and I don't know what it looks like, I have no idea, was that we don't want to take a 10% pay cut, we'll just take an extra 20 redundancies, or we'll do something else, then I think the staff forum is the place to feed in those alternative approaches. But the reality is, I can tell you from what I know, is that the business is bleeding vast amounts of money very quickly. And as a business, it has ultimately got to try and survive. And this is where there's this clash between, if you like, a business perspective and an individual perspective. You're each going to have to make your own judgment on that and make your own decisions on that. And it's not for me, in my opinion, to decide, tell you what you shouldn't do or what's right or wrong.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Earlier in the week, there was an email regarding additional furlough and shorter hours. Who does that apply to?
So I'm not sure how to answer the question specifically. I can only answer the question for us. So the reality is that, you know, and I've again been very open with you, every fortnight since this started, I've been reviewing the work patterns and trying to make sure that I can have the right people for the right reasons, for the best interest, the long-term outcome for our bit of the business in furlough, without doing any more damage to the business than is necessary. And I've tried to be pragmatic about that. So we have quite a large proportion of our business in furlough. I think the number's around 40, but don't quote me, it's somewhere like that. So about 40% of our staff are in furlough. We're now in the process of starting to remove them from furlough, because that's the right thing to do to get the business up and running. But I will only take them out of furlough, and you know, it's a decision I have to sign off and get approved every week, although I am heavily supported by Stephen Phipson. I will take them out of furlough to get the business back up and running, because I want to get us up and running so that we can continue to maintain our funding, which keeps the business alive, and if possible, in relation to what does the future business like, prepare us to take more apprentices on and keep ourselves afloat. Have I considered furloughing people on a temporary basis. I am aware of it as an option. Whether it's relevant or not, the honest answer is I haven't thought about it too much. At the moment, we are focusing on getting workshop staff out on a controlled basis. Beyond that, to be perfectly honest, I haven't thought about it too much. Will it become an opportunity? If it makes sense, yes, I'd consider it, of course.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Stephen Fipsham's mention of the 10% decrease has obviously caused issues for staff, but it's not been heard that it's official. So do you know the timelines of when it will go ahead and what the next steps are?
I assume we're talking about the pay reduction. My understanding is it's in discussion phase. I think you just need to, my understanding is that it's not been implemented yet. It's in discussion. You know, there's a discussion going with the National Staff Forum. I think the answer to that question is that you probably need to speak to Venetia as your local NSF rep, or because I think she'll probably give you a better understanding of the current status. To be perfectly honest, I've got 2 sets of NSF minutes on my computer that came through the last couple of days. I haven't read them yet. My focus, as much as I understand that this is incredibly sensitive to all of you and to me and everybody else, my focus has been very much solely about how to get us up and running again so we can get ourselves in as great a shape as we can, in the best interests of protecting as many people as I can. And although I'm aware of the 10%, suggested 10% reduction, you know, the discussion's taking place at a different level to me, and I'm just letting it happen. And that sounds a bit slopey shouldered, but I can't influence it particularly strongly either way. So I'm focusing on what I can control, and I believe that we've done a great job of that, as I said earlier on. So collectively, you know, whatever the ongoing decision-making process is, we can hold our heads up high so far and say, you know what, we did everything we could to make this work.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. So obviously we haven't been in the building for quite some time. Have the water machines been flushed out for use when the building reopens again on Monday?
Yes. So part of the reopening the building is we've had to have the building itself signed off. So it's an interesting one, actually. You pick on water. So fundamentally, we took a decision when we shut down lockdown that we wouldn't mothball the buildings, because when you mothball buildings like that, you end up having to do a load of stuff to get back up and running again. So we've had Terry and Adrian in every week, doing different things every week for 1 day a week. Purposely, one of those was to run all the taps in the centre and run all the water systems. The reality is, the idea was that we wouldn't have to go through a whole load of work to get everything back up and running. But last week, when we then spoke to the guys that are responsible for that and said, oh, this is what we've done, so you're okay to go, aren't we? They went, well, no, we're not going to guarantee it, which is a bit of a frustration for me, to say the least, and some of you know what I can be like when I'm frustrated. What we managed to do is that what's happened is the alternative to actually doing a whole load of testing and then wait and seeing is that you flush all your water systems with concentrated chlorine, which is a well-known and defined practice for purging systems. So we, after trying to avoid it, ended up earlier in this week purging all of our water systems with chlorine and then running everything through, and we had the company in to do that. And the reason for doing that is it means it takes away any risks about any problems with water supplies when we come back. And that has been completed and signed off. And that's the reason we can one of the reasons we can open on Monday.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. How will gateways be marked as the main focus is on student behaviour and working together?
Oh, interesting. If we're talking about second-year gateways, I haven't seen it officially, and I'm not sure it's official yet, but they've been cancelled for this year. So I'm not sure how official that is yet, and whether that's public domain yet even, actually. So you are privy. But my understanding is that following a lot of discussions, it's been agreed that level 2 gateways will be cancelled for this year, and that the assessment will be done by the company, by us and the employer, as to whether somebody is ready to go on to their next level, which is very useful to us because it helps with the catch up. And then they'll be reinstated again next year. That's my understanding. So if not, then actually the answer is we will continue to do gateways, and we'll have to do the best we can with what we know.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. With the financial issues as the business as a whole, why are we still going ahead with the Make UK Awards event?
Well, without knowing what the detail there is, I do believe the structure of it has changed quite dramatically, so that the cost has been wiped out to next to nothing. And the reason we go about it is because we have to make a trade-off about the bits of the business we need to do and the bits we don't, and decide whether they are the bits that the membership who pay all the money into the business value. And I guess, without having too much background information for that, whilst I do know that it's been recosted down to next to nothing, it's clearly deemed to be a part of our fundamental business. It just doesn't happen to affect us too much.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't know who asked the question specifically. I think it's one of those you might want to stick in the staff forum to ask that be answered officially. But I can only give you an opinion on that one.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Are people who volunteered for furlough being penalised for asking?
Oh, that's interesting. So I would say so my answer to that is I can think of how to answer that. Are you being penalised? I guess if you look at it from a monetary perspective, let's just look at it from a monetary perspective. You could argue the answer to that question is, I guess, yes, because if you're not furloughed, you're being paid a different salary, and or you're potentially going to have a salary drop if it's put through of only 10%. I don't think the answer is as clear cut as that. Firstly, I think it's really appreciative that some people volunteered. A lot of people didn't get much choice. I'm not sure that there were very large numbers volunteered either. And secondly, every decision about whether we should or shouldn't furlough something was not done on the basis of anything, from my perspective, of anything other than business need, or and was it in our interests to actually do that? So if you volunteered and I wasn't happy that it could be done, I would quite legitimately and openly say no. So actually, there's no prejudice done. There's no prejudice one way or the other around the furloughing. It's purely a pragmatic way of running the business for the long-term benefit of everybody, whilst taking advantage of the opportunities that government schemes gave us.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If the company is bleeding money, why are furloughed staff being forced to take 5 days holiday?
So one of the big issues we've got as a business is that at the back end of this, and bear in mind it's June now, and 31st of December is only 6 months away. One of the big issues we've got in the business that's already been identified, and it happens naturally anyway, is that vast numbers of staff have not taken any holiday because they've either been working from home or furloughed, and they haven't been able to go on holiday. And actually, the business will hurt in a different way, which is a lot more damning and uncontrollable, if we find that we've got X numbers of people all wanting to take their holidays in the last 6 months. And either way, there's a contractual requirement to pay for holidays, whether we like it or not. So it has to be factored into the forecasted cost of running the business anyway. And so, yes, it's a bit draconian. I agree with that, but that's the reality. We've got to reduce the holiday load, because we will not be able to say you can't take it, and we certainly haven't got the capacity to roll it over either.
Okay, thank you.
So,
next question. If the reduction does happen in pay, will Make UK support employees that will be massively affected by it for personal reasons?
So I don't know the answer to that question absolutely. Again, I think it's something that you might want to talk to Venetia about as a suggestion. So I do know there was something put together, and I don't know how. To be honest, I don't know if it was actually implemented. But there was something put together of similar nature for people who were furloughed. I don't know if there are any instances where that was actually implemented, but I do know I remember seeing some documentation that was I call it a policy statement of some sort. Whether there would be a similar policy statement around the salary reduction, I honestly can't answer that question. It's a question for you to put to the staff forum as maybe a softening blow, if that's the right term, to help those that are really worried. And you know, that's probably the best route. But I'm not aware of anything formally from my perspective. I've been close enough to that.
Venetia has just typed, helpfully, a couple of answers. So
okay, cool.
For everyone's reference, Stephen Phipson will hopefully say about the final decision on the 10% pay decrease in next week's webinar, which I think you should have seen an invitation for earlier today. All questions that have been received by Venetia have been submitted to the National Staff Forum. That includes the question about the awards and also any of the other questions that people have sent. Venetia has said there is a hardship fund available through HR. And if you need any more information, then please to contact Venetia and she'll be able to help you. So hopefully that helps everybody. There was one other question about missed or reduced employer pension contributions being made up by Make UK in the future for the 10% pay reduction. So I don't know if you want to answer that, Stephen, or whether we just put that through.
I have no idea. I suspect it's part of that ongoing. The thing is, the discussions that the questions we were all talking about, are discussions around a running discussion with the staff forum and senior managers of Make UK and HR that are around these types of questions and the consequences. So I really can't answer them for you because I don't know the answer and I don't think it's been decided. So again, I think these are the questions you need to put into staff forum. And if Venetia's on the call, she's had the questions, so maybe she can add it to her list.
Perfect, thank you. And I'll send Venetia these questions so that she's got them for submitting to the National Staff Forum. So that's all of the questions that have come through. Just to remind everybody, this webinar has been recorded, and I'll also send you a separate link to the video so you can watch that outside of the webinar recording for your future information. Stephen, I don't know if you want to say anything else before we close.
Yeah, just close up. I know this is tough times. I know this is like lots of businesses and like lots of situations, this has become highly personalised. It's one thing talking about businesses, these nebulous things but they're part of our livelihoods. They're important to us. It's important that we at least have something to hang on to going forward. But I know also that it's getting hard. It's getting hard for everybody now. I don't think we're alone in this. And I know it's, the harder it gets, the more personalised it becomes. I am very, very aware of it. It's difficult for me to be sympathetic in the sense that I can't influence it. All I'm trying to do, and I want you to genuinely believe that, is to do the right things for the centre to keep this part of the business going so that we, as many of us who are on this call, have a future here, if that's where we choose to have it, of course. And that's all I'm trying to do, and I believe that's the best contribution I can make at the moment. So, hopefully that's recognised, and I am incredibly aware of the efforts that people are putting in to try and make this work. I see it every day, and I feel it, and I hear it, and I appreciate it, and thank you all for that.
On that, Stephen, we've had a comment coming in just to say thank you to you for keeping the motivation of everybody going, and the fact that you're doing a good job in terms of keeping the business afloat and keeping everyone positive, and your comments go a long way to keeping everyone motivated. So that's a comment that's just come in.
And from whoever that was, Mr. Anon or Miss Anon, thank you very much. It's much appreciated.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that finishes the webinar for today. So just to remind you all, it has been recorded, and I'll send out the link for you shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.